You are standing on a rotting wooden deck. Salt stings your eyes. The rope in your hands is slick with rain, and somewhere above you, a voice is screaming orders you barely understand. This is not a movie. This is a real ship in a real year, and you are the newest member of one of the largest pirate fleets that ever existed. But the real danger and daily reality of pirate life is far harsher, far more organized, and far stranger than anything you've imagined. Forget the eye patches, forget the parrots, forget the lone captain with a peg leg barking orders into the wind. 19th century piracy was not chaos. It was a business. It had ranks, it had rules, it had punishments so severe that most sailors feared their own crew more than they feared the Navy hunting them. You are about to live through every level of that hierarchy, from the boy scrubbing the deck to the woman who commanded thousands of men and never lost a battle. You start at the bottom. Your first days are spent as a ship's boy. You are maybe 12 years old. You carry gunpowder. You empty buckets of waste over the side. You sleep wherever there is space, usually pressed between coils of rope and barrels of salted fish. Historian Deanne Murray, who spent years studying piracy in the South China Sea, found that many boys entered these fleets not through kidnapping, as legend suggests, but through poverty. Families sold sons into pirate service because it was, brutally, a better chance at survival than starving on land. Your stomach growls constantly. Your hands blister within a week. Do you think you would last a month? Sleep does not come easily either. The ship never stops moving. It groans. It creaks. It lists suddenly in the dark. And every sound could mean a storm, an attack, or simply the vessel settling into another restless night. You learn to sleep in fragments. You learn to wake instantly. Within weeks, your body forgets what a full night's rest even feels like. Is this what you pictured when you imagined pirate life? Or did you imagine treasure maps and tropical beaches? If you survive the first few months, you become a deckhand. Now you climb the rigging. Now you learn knots that can save your life or strangle you if tied wrong. The ropes cut your palms until calluses form thick enough to grip a blade without flinching. You eat the same meal every day, usually rice or hardtack, a biscuit so dense that sailors joked you could stop a musket ball with it. Clean water is rare. Most of what you drink is warm, brackish, and shared with insects. Historian Marcus Rediker, who has spent decades researching maritime piracy, describes shipboard life as a world with its own laws, entirely separate from the nations these men and women fled. On a pirate ship, the rules were not suggestions, they were survival. Illness spreads fast in these conditions. Dysentery, scurvy, infected wounds that never quite close. There is no doctor waiting in the next town. If you are lucky, someone aboard has learned enough about herbs and wound care to keep you alive. If you are not, you simply hope the fever breaks before the ship reaches open water again, far from any port that might help you. And the rules were strict. Fighting among crew members was often banned outright, punishable by flogging or worse, because a fleet with hundreds of ships could not survive internal chaos while hunting merchant vessels or evading imperial navies. Gambling was sometimes forbidden. Theft from a fellow crew member could mean losing an ear or losing your life. This surprises people. Doesn't it sound more like a military unit than a band of outlaws? Prove yourself as a deckhand, and you might rise to gunner. This is where things get louder and far more lethal. You are responsible for loading, aiming, and firing cannons that weigh more than a horse. One mistake, one spark near the powder store, and the entire ship could be reduced to splinters in seconds. Gunners lived closest to death of anyone aboard, not from enemy fire, but from their own weapons. Your hands shake the first time you light the fuse. The recoil nearly knocks you off your feet. The smoke burns your lungs. But when the cannonball tears through an enemy hull, you understand exactly why this rank exists, and exactly why so few men wanted it. The noise alone changes you. A single broadside can leave your ears ringing for hours, sometimes for days. Gunners often lost their hearing permanently before they turned 30. You start reading lips without realizing it. You start flinching at sudden sounds long after the battle ends. Nobody warned you that survival could cost you a sense as much as it could cost you a limb. Would you have chosen this rank if you had known the price? Above the gunners stood the quartermaster, and this rank is where pirate life stops resembling anything you were taught in school. The quartermaster was not chosen by the captain. He was elected by the crew, and he held nearly as much power as the captain himself. He settled disputes. He distributed food. He decided punishments for crimes committed aboard ship. In many fleets, the quartermaster's word on discipline could override even the captain's. Why would pirates, supposedly lawless criminals, build a democracy into their command structure? Because a crew that felt heard was a crew less likely to mutiny, and mutiny killed more captains than any navy ever did. You watch the quartermaster settle a dispute over stolen rations. Two crewmen nearly come to blows. He listens to both sides, weighs the evidence, and hands down a punishment that satisfies neither man completely, but stops the fight before it starts. This is the job. Not glory, not gold. Just the constant, exhausting work of keeping hundreds of armed, desperate people from tearing each other apart before the enemy even arrives. Now you reach the officers. The boatswain kept the ship itself alive, managing rigging, sails, anchors, every physical piece of the vessel that could fail and drown you all in an instant. The sailing master read the stars and the currents. The one person aboard who could tell you whether you were sailing towards safety or straight into a naval blockade. These were not glamorous titles, but without them, no pirate fleet survived its first storm. You spend a season shadowing the sailing master, learning to read the color of the water for hidden reefs, the shape of clouds for coming storms, the behavior of birds for signs of land. This knowledge takes years to master, and a single wrong reading can run an entire ship aground. The boatswain, meanwhile, teaches you that a single frayed rope, ignored for even a week, can snap in a gale and take a man's arm with it. Every officer's job, you realize, is really the same job. Keep death slightly further away than it wants to be. And then, finally, you reach the very top of the largest pirate confederation of the 19th century, a position held not by a mustached man with a cutlass, but by a former sex worker from a floating brothel in Canton. Her name was Qing Shi. By 1807, she commanded a fleet estimated at over 1,800 ships and somewhere between 70,000 and 80,000 pirates, a force larger than many national navies of her era. When her husband, the pirate leader Cheng Yi, died, she did not step aside. She took command outright, formalized the fleet's legal code, and expanded it into what historians now consider one of the most successful pirate operations in recorded history. Under her rule, deserting your post meant execution. Assaulting a female captive without permission meant execution. Even consensual relationships between crew members required approval, because unregulated conflict could tear a fleet this size apart in a single night. She was never captured. She negotiated an amnesty with the Chinese government, kept her fortune, and lived out her life running a gambling house. Does that sound like the ending you expected? Picture standing before her. She is not shouting. She rarely needs to. Her captains report to her directly. Her fleet is organized into color-coded squadrons, each with its own subordinate commander, and every ship you see stretching to the horizon answers ultimately to the woman in front of you. The Chinese Imperial Navy sent fleet after fleet against her and lost every time. Portuguese and British forces, called in to help crush her, also failed. Eventually, the government did what none of its warships could do. It negotiated. Most of her fleet accepted amnesty, kept their weapons, and many of her officers were absorbed into the very government that had hunted them for years. Every rank you just lived through, from powder boy to fleet commander, existed for one reason: control. A ship without structure did not survive long enough to become a legend. The romantic image of pirates as reckless outlaws ignoring every rule was, according to researchers like Cordingly, who has documented piracy's golden age extensively, largely a myth built later by novelists and playwrights. Real pirate crews were often more disciplined than the merchant ships they raided, because merchant sailors served under captains who could flog them for any reason, while pirates operated under codes they had a hand in writing. Compare that to the merchant sailors of the same era, men who served under captains appointed by wealthy shipowners who never set foot on the water themselves. Those sailors had no vote, no elected quartermaster to appeal to, no guaranteed compensation if they lost a hand hauling cargo in a storm. Punishment on a merchant vessel could be arbitrary and brutal, decided by a single man answerable to no one aboard. The irony is almost impossible to ignore. The so-called lawless criminals built fairer systems than the legal trade they preyed upon.
That contrast is the part worth sitting with. These were sailors who left brutal, unequal systems on land and at sea, and built something stricter in some ways, but fairer in others. Injured crew members were often guaranteed compensation before any treasure was divided. Votes decided major decisions. Leadership could be removed if it failed the crew. It was not freedom from rules. It was freedom to choose whose rules you lived under, and that distinction changed everything about who joined and why they stayed. Think about the systems you live inside today, the workplaces, the institutions, the hierarchies you never voted for and rarely question. Somewhere on a rotting deck 2 centuries ago, a frightened 12-year-old boy and a woman who would command tens of thousands of armed men were operating under a system with more say, more protection, and more consequence for abuse of power than most people experience in their working lives today. You were standing on that deck. You climbed every rank. And the real danger was never the sea, the cannon fire, or the Navy hunting you down. It was, and still is, what happens when power goes unchecked, and what people are willing to build when they finally get the chance to check it.